Well, this is my first time here, so I don't know what the agenda is other than just words of wisdom, as I see here. So give a minute or two for everybody else to come on in. And I'll give you words of wisdom. Storytelling techniques. Okay. All right. Well, it's now 3:01, so any stragglers who are late, well, guess what? The doors have shut. Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Heineman. I'm the CEO of Old Skulle. I've been in the video game industry since the beginning of time, where we wrote bits with stones, and zeros are stones and ones are sticks. But the started off as a video game champion with Atari Space Invaders on the Atari 2600. Won the nationals and so forth, which then led me to pirate Atari 2600 games because I couldn't afford them. Because, yeah, being an esports winner back then, you didn't win that much money. It's not like today where you're winning $1 million prizes. Back then, my prize was an Atari Missile Command arcade video game, which you can't exactly eat. But afterwards, went to a company called Boone. Eventually, meet up with some other people, and the four of us created a place called Interplay. You may have heard of that, where I then ended up becoming the creator of Bard's Tale 3, The Thief of Fate, and the creator of Dragon Wars. And my technology is in pretty much every single game Interplay made up until around 1995. Since then, been doing my own video game projects and move on to present day, where I'm now working as the CEO of Old Skulle, where we are doing a fantasy role-playing game, which we're still working on it, just a back burner project, because, when you're doing it with no money, things take time. It's called Dragons of the Rip Shredded Worlds. Shredded Worlds is a short name for it. And that's being designed by myself and Janelle Jakeways. And also for other things, we did a remake of Battle Chess recently. It's up on Steam. It's called Battle Chess Game of Kings. And then did work on a port for Wii U's New and Tasty for the Vita and the Wii U. And also helping out on a project which I can't announce right now, but it is something that I think you're going to like it when we're able to announce it. So back to storytelling. When we were designing games, RPG games, one of the first games I worked on that was storytelling was a game called Mind Shadow. This was done in 1983-84 for Activision through Interplay Productions. The game was literally a retelling of the Bourne identity. We couldn't use the book. We originally wanted to, but we couldn't license it, so we had to make our own version of the story of your character who wakes up, you don't know who you are, but you find you have certain skills. And it's done in a graphic text adventure like Time Zone, Wizard and the Princess, games that were done in that era, 1983. This is a while ago. The game was story-driven. You type in it says, you have woken up, washed up on a beach with no memory of how you got here and a bump on your head. Okay, what do you do? And as you type in things like get up, go north, get rope, look at sand, every single thing we can come up with of what the user could say, we had to come up with either a stale answer saying, use the sand looks back at you, sand is squishy, the trees sway in the breeze, everything to give you a feeling that there is a lot of depth there. You just have to discover it. This is something I really enjoyed when creating these kind of games, just any kind of adventure games, RPG games, is the thrill of discovery and just the sheer amount of text you have to write in order for you to come up with all these different answers to questions people come up with. Now, with Mind Shadow, Treasure Sanction, Borrow Time, and Task Times and Tone Time, those are the first 4 games that I wrote for Interplay. They were all graphic text adventures, And each one of them, the technology I wrote and created for it allowed me to put more and more text behind it. But every time we play the game, we always come up with new ways of saying, okay, look at this character, interact with that character. A good example is in Task Times in Tonetown. You come up with a character who's named Hawkeye, and he got his dog, Sam. Or sorry, let's take it back. The dog's name is Hawkeye, and the man's name is Sam. Sam's a blind guy who's sitting on a bench, and his dog, who also is wearing sunglasses and has a cane, because he thought it'd be cute. We're just sitting there. Now, if you type in pet Hawkeye, the dog, the caption will read, Hawkeye always liked you, says Sam. But if you type in pet Sam, it says, Sam always liked you, says Hawkeye, the dog. And so people laugh their heads off because they did something unexpected, and yet the game had an answer for it. I just reversed the characters' names when I print out the text. And of course, that meant that the dog was talking to you. It's like, okay, we'll just ignore that part. It's these kind of exploration, by the way, that Sam and Hawkeye was actually not in Task Times in Tonetown, it was in Borrowed Time. I keep forgetting about it. There's so many games in so many years, it's like I keep it's starting to get fuzzy and starting to mesh together these days. Because, when I wrote that game in 1984 and 85, that's 30 years ago. Holy crap, 30 years ago. Some of you here probably are not even that old. Stalt here writes, I remember playing Mind Shadow when I was a little kid. It was one of my mom's favorite games. Haha. Well, I was the one who wrote that. Yeah, Ski writes what Mike was just saying, that most of you aren't even 30 years old. Yeah, it was 30 years ago when I wrote Mind Shadow. Actually, 31, because I was in 1983 when I started the project and finished in 1984. So some of you are saying, like, wait a minute, my birth date isn't even 1984. Didn't even exist. Well, that's how long I've been in the industry. Well, later on, we were working on Bard's Tale. I was doing all the low-level graphic drivers, and Michael Cranford was doing all the main game logic and code. And he had a very myopic view of the world, in the sense that he thought only girls don't play these games, so he refused to put female characters. He, in fact, pretty much every single character in the game, when I did an Ars Asset review recently of Bard's Tale, there was like no women, none. Every single character was either a creature like a stone golem, where it doesn't really have a sex, or a man. And I brought it up to him back then, and his answer to me was, women don't play these games. So when eventually, when I got control of the project and did Bard's Tale 3, the first thing I put in there was female character, female protagonist, female everything. I didn't do everybody female. I didn't reverse it. There were lots of men in there. And heck, the bad guy was Tarjan, the villain or a low-level villain from Bard's Tale 1, and he became the main villain in Bard's 3. But you can have female avatars, females, because storytelling. You don't know who is playing your game. You don't know where they're from. So you need to make it so that the story is as wide and as rich and as few as assumptions as possible from the point of view of the player. Is the player a woman? Is the player a man? Is the player someone who doesn't care? Is the player, offended by things that are anti-Christian, or they're offended by things that are fill in the blank of whatever religion it is. I mean, there's hundreds of religions in this world. Does it play to their sensibilities and their sensitivities? But the real thing is, you don't even need to play into that. You just simply create your own mythos and stuff like that, and just work with that. So with Bard's Tale 3, that is, we came up Michael Stackpole, because Cranford had nothing to do with Bard's Tale 3. Michael Stackpole came up with this really great story and idea, and I just ran with it to turn Bard's Tale 3, The Thief of Fate, into a story in which each character has different things that they could do, and every single puzzle could be solved different ways. So some puzzles you can actually just go ahead and murder everybody, and that's the solution. But you don't have to. You can actually just go steal the key instead of just killing the guys to get it. Or if you swam, or if we did this, some of these things I did in Dragon Wars, is that try to make it so that if a person wants to kill everything, let them win. Let them play the game. They murder everybody in sight. But at the same time, if the person wants to actually win your game without killing a single individual, let them do it. Recently, there was a game that was just put out last, like 6-7 months ago, called Undertale. And it actually used that as part of its game mechanic, where you have to play the game all the way through, where you murder everybody, and then you play the game all the way through again, except this time you don't kill a single person. And that's how you win the games. You actually have to play, because it remembers when you go through resets. Someone says, makes me think of Dishonored. I'm not really familiar with that particular game, Dishonored, but I wouldn't be surprised that there's games out there which genocide is the way to win, and other people would say, don't hurt a single person. But in the games I design, like Bard's Tale 3 and Dragon Wars, is however way you want to play it. Such as, like, the game has all these character classes: Paladin, Thief, Monk, Hunter, Bard, etc. Could you win the game with a party of all bards? Could you win the game with a party of all thieves? It's difficult, but you can do it. Whereas the original Bard's Tale 1 and 2, they were puzzles which required you to have a specific type of character in your party. If you didn't, it would be nigh impossible for you to win the game. Examples like at Bard's Tale 1, there was a throne in which you had to have a bard sit on the throne, and only a bard, in Baron Harkon's Tower, I believe it was, in which only then a door would open. And once the door opens, then you could go through into the castle. But if you chose to have a party of no bards, how do you get in? And the answer in this case is you don't. That myself is not very good game design, because you're trying to make a world where people will go in there and have so much fun being in this world that they tell their own stories. So some of the techniques I did to create this game was I created things like text compression, and then during playtesting, I would actually have the game recording what people were doing. Like if you're at this square, what skills are people using? What spells were they casting? What were they trying to do? And this is during playtest. It wasn't when the game shipped. The whole idea was that I got these records and looked at them and said, oh, I never thought that someone would cast this kind of spell near the lake. And I would ask, well, why'd you cast that spell? It says, oh, I thought this way. It says, okay, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to add a little extra text there to give you an effect, or hit you with a lightning bolt, or do something else to tell you that, nice try, but let's try something else. Either in the case of, hey, that's a good idea, I'm going to let you get away with that. Or in another case, good idea, but I'm going to punish you to make you sure that you're not going to get away, because it's too much work for me to create a whole new scenario or something to go down that path, because I do need to ship the frickin' game. Because that's one of the biggest problems when you're designing one of these games, is that I could sit there for Dragon Wars and I could just keep on making more and more levels, more and more scenarios, but sooner or later we've got to ship this game. And if you don't ship the game, we don't make any money. Don't make any money, I can't pay rent. And I starve and live in a cardboard box out in the behind a market basket. And I have a little experience doing that, but rather not go into that story. But with but a lot of the techniques I do, it's just where when you make your game, you really should make a version of the game that when people play it, if you're designing your own game, that it records what people are trying to do, and especially if it's something the game wasn't designed to do, like put a bucket on someone's head. The game would say, oh, someone put a bucket on someone's head. And then you notice that, hey, everybody's putting buckets on someone's head. Like they figured out with, what was it called? Skyrim. That if you put a bucket on someone's head, then you could rob them completely blind, and They're just standing there with a bucket on their head, never once actually deciding they should take this bucket off their head. Of course, then that would mean that you could put a patch in there, which then later on says, oh, you put a bucket on someone's head. If it stays on the head for like 10 seconds and the character should knock the bucket off, AI-wise, it would be say, oh, if the character cannot see anything for more than 6 inches after a period of time, knock whatever it is that's blocking their view. So then people, ask yourself as a person, if you stand there in your store and a character came up to you and put a bucket on your head, first off, you'd think, what's wrong with you? And second of all, you'd take that bucket off your head. But fun aside, I'm certain when they were designing the game and testing it, no one ever thought of putting a bucket on an NPC's head. It's just, you can't think of that kind of stuff. And, you can't, what's it called? You can't make this shit up. It just happens. I'm going to move on now to good game dev. I've been designing and writing game code for pretty much forever. And I've had my share of failures and I've had my share of successes. And what I do is I mostly do programming. I program in C++, assembly, shader language, dabble in C# and JavaScript, do a lot of stuff in Python. Heck, a lot of stuff lately in Python, but mostly I do my work in C and C++. In all this time, I've learned so many different ways of writing cross-platform code, stuff that I've shared on GitHub. So if any of you are aspiring programmers and stuff like that, just do a search for Burgerlib, Burgerlib on GitHub, and you will see what I have open sourced so far. There's a lot more stuff that I haven't open sourced, but it's there. It's a culmination of 30 years of programming and figuring out all the different programming languages, and yep, that's it. Yes, Skeet, that's it. All the different ways a C compiler completely works and how it doesn't work. How to crash a compiler or cause it to generate bad code. And also, one other thing is, for library code, I always subscribe to the idea of document the code as if 10 years from now, whoever looks at your code is a serial killer. So that if they can't figure out and it pisses them off, they'll come to your house and murder you. I go out of my way to document the code to make sure it's well understood, that there's examples to be had, so that somebody 20 years from now who finds this archives in whatever remains of society, if Donald Trump ends up being president, whatever alien overlords come by to see, hey, what happened to this planet? It was a big flash. They'll be able to understand what it is and see, how it worked, how it wrote it, how what it was supposed to do, and best of all, they don't need to contact me and ask me, hey Becky, why did you write it this way? Like it's oh snap, roast. Well, we might end up being roasted if if certain politicians get power. But back to the main subject is, with all this coding that I've been doing, I share it on GitHub, but it is the basis of so many games I've worked on. There's like 38 games now that are released, that are out there in the world, that have Burgerlib code in it. Greatberg just writes, Dragon Wars is one of my all-time fave games. You mentioned doing a Kickstarter for spiritual follow-up, still in the cards. Would love to play a true sequel to that game, or perhaps a reboot based on the original. Well, actually, that's the game I was planning on doing. It's called Shredded Worlds, Dragons of the Rip. It's a spiritual successor. I was in negotiations with Interplay to get the IP, but unfortunately, we just couldn't come up to an agreement, and just leave it at that. So as a result, we then made a game in which, now this is a story that I've actually been working on for the past 20 years, in which the tagline is "They've always been among us." So dragons of the Rip, they've always been among us. And it is about dragons who can change forms, and they have literally always been among us, and they're up to something. And you're going to be taking your party of adventurers in this fantasy world, only to find that there are gates to other worlds. Much inspired by what I did with Bard's Tale 3. But however, though, there are numerous differences. I mean, it's not Bard's Tale 3 by any stretch of the imagination. The story is very different, and the play mechanics are different. It's all skill-based. It's all party-based. You can run around all these different characters. It's all done in a full 3D view. We're already prototyping it in the Unreal Engine. Our biggest problem is just essentially funding. I'm busy, even though I run a video game company, the video game company goes from feast to famine all the time. Right now we're on the verge of feasting, but until then we're still eating mac and cheese right now. So when you're eating mac and cheese, you have to do projects that people pay you for just to keep the lights on, and work on Dragons of the Rip in the back burner. And I've experimented with Kickstarter, but the problem is nowadays with some Kickstarter successes and failures is that I have seen, unless we have a demo of the game, we will have a very difficult time getting people to fund us. Because, with game designs by Janelle Jakeways, engine and game story by Rebecca Heineman, and we got a who's who of authors who are working with us to do scenarios and levels. That's still not enough to get people to give us the $500,000 that we really need to be able to do this game. And while the game, $500,000, you're going to say, how could you do a game for $500,000? Well, we do things cheap here. We don't have big salaries. We have a virtual company, a virtual meaning that we don't have an office. Everybody works out of their homes. We save our money. That's how we've been doing stuff with Old Skulle ever since we founded. Bring in people when we need them, and as contractors, when the project's done, we let them go because we just don't have the money to keep them on staff. But at the same time, we've been able to put out certain nice games, helped out with, what was it? This game called Pocket Wings that we were helped out with on the iOS. We helped out with a game called Big City Stories for a company called Hellfire Games. We helped out, of course, we did the ports of New and Tasty for Oddworld. But each one of these games, they paid us some money, keeps the lights on, but it isn't enough for us to have a big pile of cash for us to say, hey, let's go hire a bunch of people, start working on Dragons of the Rip to at least get us a demo. And that's where it's standing. Now, one thing I can say is that Janelle and I actually have storyboarded out some of the first pages of the comic book called Shredded Worlds. And it is based on the backstory that is used for Dragons of the Rip. So we're hoping to have that out in a few months, and we're going to put it up as a webcomic. Because that's one of the things I like to do is I write for comics, like Sailor Bronco is out. It's been out for many, many years now. I haven't actually written any new pages for a while, but I'm not a novice when it comes to creating comic books. So I thought, hey, we have this wonderful backstory. We have all this huge world and all these characters we designed for Dragons of the Rip. There's more than enough here that we can actually do a comic book. And there you go. In this digression here, it's really a matter of, for us to do Dragons of the Rip, we need about $500,000. To get $500,000, we need to be able to do a Kickstarter, but to do that, we need to A, get people interested in what we're trying to do. A comic book would solve that. B, we need to get a demo of what we plan the game to look like, and that's the thing that's killing us, because that too costs money, and right now we're just doing it on our spare time. Like I would have my 9 to 5 doing projects that are paying me money, and I only have a couple of hours to work on stuff with Dragons of the Rip. So it's been very slow going. I mean, gosh, what I would give if I had, let's say, $50,000 just so I can work on this game for 3 months without any distractions, and at that point I had the demo and be able to pay my rent and my food and artists and stuff, but don't have that. So there you go. But back to doing game dev, it is like this actually really does go into doing great game dev. Is like the previous speaker, Rupert Megnot. I'm probably mispronouncing his name, so please forgive me, Rupert. Um, when doing a game, planning is everything. You have to plan it out before you write one line of code, before you make one new scenario or anything in the game. Because if you just do the project by the seat of your pants, you'll end up with a project that'll never get finished. It'll just keep being designed and designed. And I've been on projects like that in which someone says to me, "Hey, I want a game that's a such and such." I says, "Great." Says, "Let's start working on it." So we start working on it. And then they would say, "Oh, there's a competing game that looks like this. Let's switch gears." Okay, I would have to start the game all over again. Oh, we have to switch gears again. Oh, we have to add this. We have to add that. And then by the time a year or 2 years go by, and then we finally say, "Fuck it, just ship what we've got," then I get yelled at saying, "Why did this game take 2 years to do? You should have had it done in 6 months." And I'm like, if we was designing the game that we shipped 2 years ago, yes, I would have had it done in 6 months. But we've had 18 months of stuff we threw in the trash because we had to keep redoing what we were doing over and over again because of the fact that we didn't have a clear vision of what it was that we were trying to do in the first place. And running a video game company teaches me one clear lesson, and that is time is money. There is no other way to say it, because you say, "Hey, I want a game out in," same what Fluffgar says, "Same thing often happens in artwork. Try this style, try that style, try another style." That is one thing I was adamant when we were designing Dragons of the Rip. I had Janelle and Maureen sit there and say, "I want the art style. I want to know, what does this game look like?" And so they tried a couple of different samples, but we only just did one room. And we didn't even finish it. We just did like a really half-assed job with the room. But the idea is, do we want to do photorealistic? Do we want to do toon shader? Did we want to do cartoony? Did we want to make it look more like My Little Pony type line art? Each one of these art styles, when we looked at it, says, does it work with the kind of game? Some of them we said, no, this just doesn't work for the story we want to tell. Then we had like narrowed it down to 3 or 4 art styles, and we said, okay, how long does it take us to draw this image? And one of them was like the photorealistic, says, oh, that took us 3 days to do, whereas the other one took us 6 hours. I think we should do the 6-hour version, only because if we're going to be drawing 5 cities and a wilderness area and other dimensions, if it's going to take us 3 times as much time to draw the same amount of art in order for us to achieve photorealism, whereas this cartoony-like art is one where people say, yeah, if there's art errors in it, but who cares? It's the style. So we could do it in 6 hours to make this building instead of 3 days. Then says, not only do we get more art for the same amount of time, but at the same time, an artist, we have to pay that person X number of dollars an hour. So, that house, if it takes an artist 6 hours to do it, 6 hours times their hourly rate, that house costs us $100 and some odd dollars, $200, $300, whatever the price is. Whereas whatever that price is, we triple it, and that's how much it costs for photorealistic. So is the game going to cost us $3 million, or can we do it for $500,000? Those are some of the decisions that we had to do when we were just storyboarding and figuring out this art. And once we figured out the art style, we also figured out the level layout style. Like, how long does it take us to build this in Unity? How long does it take us to build this in Unreal? How easy to use the tools? How sync goes back and forth until we realize that for the best bang for the buck for what we're trying to do, Unreal was the winner. It was faster to build, faster to prototype, faster for us to get the art in there. The art style we did select was one where we could churn it out relatively quickly. It works with the kind of humor and the kind of grittiness, because parts of the game are very gritty. Other parts are hilarious, where it's just like, okay, this is a really ridiculous level, but it works because it was created. The world was created by a dragon who happens to be the equivalent of Loki. He just loves to just pull your chain, and so everything is ridiculous. But it just worked. But now that we have the art style and the game engine and the game ideas and how we're going to churn it out, now we can sit out saying, okay, for $500,000, what can we buy? How many levels can we do? How many? But it's always back to time is money. Because if the art took more than 6 hours to do, well, if the artist took 7 hours, 8 hours, 2 days to do it, well, they're still going to get paid for 2 days worth of work, which means now we're going to have less art. Okay, someone right there, it's like, well, you just got to amuse yourself somehow when you're an aeons old dragon. Yeah, well, actually, in our game, the dragons aren't aeons old. The dragons live a lifespan of about 300 years. So therefore, is that, because like one thing I was doing with the game design of Mythos is I was looking at Mythos of all the things I've ever done in the history of my stuff that I've ever done, and I thought to myself, how would a creature live for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years? That'd be kind of a boring life. And also at the same time is, think about it, you have all these immortal creatures that you see in films. Eventually, some hero is going to come up and put a sword in your stomach. So as much as you'd like to live a couple of thousand years, you can be certain that even a dragon like Smaug from The Hobbit, he was an old dragon, but then they put an arrow in him. So he stopped aging, and he became delicious. I mean, would you like a dragon burger? They're selling it down over at the near the Craggy Mountain. Get it while supplies last. But so I had this mythos in which the dragons live anywhere between 100 to 300 years old, so that therefore, as time goes on, history is rewritten so that what they remember in their history is not necessarily what really happened. And in this case, the story began 3,000 years ago, but the human survivors of a dragon attack end up on another world, and they've evolved for 3,000 years under the guidance, and they've got their own world and technologies and stuff like that from ancient times, and they've moved on, and the dragons forgot about them. And after a couple of generations, they don't even know about it until eventually the dragons find them again, and they said, oh. And it turns out that the right dragons found them, because there's factions within the dragons. Some of them hate humans and would like to have them all extinct. Others think that they make great pets. Others would like to treat them as equals. Well, the ones that treat them as equals is the ones who found this group, which is where we've started our adventure. And we need to deal with all the different dragons, all the different worlds that they're from, in dealing with how to solve the grand problem, in which if I told you it would kind of spoil everything, because there is a twist ending to when you get to the end of the game. There's a huge twist there, and you're going like, holy shit, that was unexpected. And at that point, you got to deal with it and figure out a solution. Of course, there's multiple solutions. Solutions could be, you could, at the end of the game, decide, fuck it, I'm going to join you and rule with them. Or you're going to say, I'm going to kill the big bad dragon, and you kill him, and then you may either get stuck, or you may end up back in your home world, or all these different endings that can occur, which I do give you the ending. You could say, you know what, I'm going to plant my banner and I'm going to follow you. And so it's like, okay, you've scored enough bad points in the game, you've done enough bad things, sure, it's good to be bad. And that's how you end the game. Or, whatever. But it's back to, game design. But in all the stuff, it was all pre-planned. I'm still going through all the game design and so forth, figuring out, because I'm going through, revising things and figuring out what works and doesn't work. And of course, some people's games come out and go like, ah, damn it, they used an idea that I had. I'm going to have to either rework my idea. Otherwise, people are going to think that they stole it, I stole it from them, when in reality, I came up with it long ago, but I just never was able to release the game with it. But back to time is money. One of the reasons that a lot of game companies fail is the fact that they start up with X number of dollars. You work at a video game company, or you've got you're in college and you got something to do while you're between classes, whatever it is. You start working on your game. The trouble is, sooner or later, your savings or your situation changes or whatever. If your game isn't shipping and making you money, then you're going to have to put your game aside. If you are a video game company who got some investment capital, like let's say you somehow convince an investor, and that investor could be mom, or it could be a bank, or it could be one of those angel firms that go around investing money into video game companies. Nevertheless, whatever it is they invest in you, that money goes fast. Oh my God, it goes fast. Like you see all these Kickstarters that they get this big chunk of money and say, oh my God, I've got $500,000, I got $1 million, I got all this money. Oh, we're set for life. No, you pay, let's just say $15 minimum wage. $15 minimum wage comes out to around $28,000, $28,000 to $30,000 a year. Well, let's see here. 3 artists making the minimum wage is about, when you factor in equipment, stuff like that, $100,000. So you have these 3 artists for 1 year, and then $100,000 goes gone, bye-bye. You get an office. That's about $20,000 to $50,000. Bye-bye. You pay yourself some money. Okay, pay yourself minimum wage. Great. Some people are dumb and they say, hey, I'm going to pay myself competitive wages, $75,000 a year, $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, whatever it is. But, well, you pay $200,000 a year. That means that $500,000 goes away in 2.5 years, and it's all gone. Every penny. And you're only paying yourself. It goes quickly. So you have to say, the sad moment when you live in a state, minimum wage is half of that. Well, hopefully I live in a state, and just so everybody knows, I live in Seattle. And thankfully, Seattle here has passed a $15 minimum wage. It is being phased in slowly, but in about a year or two, it's $15. In fact, right now, as it is, when I get contractors here at Old Skulle, I budget them out at $15 an hour, because I don't want these guys and girls to starve. I want them to actually focus on work and be able to pay their rent, not have to say, well, I'll work on the art for you when I'm not working at Walmart or somewhere else because I need to make enough hours to survive. But even so, even at half that, $8 an hour minimum wage, you're still going to have to go through the money quickly. It is amazing. Like motion, what if your game uses motion capture? You're going to have to get the software. You're going to have to get the motion capture data. Even if you do it yourself, you're still going to need equipment and cameras. You're going to have to do voice acting. People need to get paid. Yes, you could probably get yourself or do your own voice acting or something, but and that's, of course, the game needs it. Sound effects, music, so forth. Every one of these things, unless you can do it yourself. But even if you do it yourself, you got to have to ask yourself this. You need to be paid. Because you got to, either you get paid by working at Target, or you're working at EA or something and they don't know you're doing the side project. Or better yet, you're at home focusing exclusively on this game. But how are you paying your rent? How are you putting food on the table? If you do not have a salary for yourself, or have savings you could work from to pay for your monthly upkeep, sooner or later, you're going to be thrown out in the street. And then where's your game going to be now? Example, like in the Kickstarter for Dragons of the Rip that we want to do, Shredder World's Dragons of the Rip. We budget $500,000. Of that, we ask for $500,000, and we plan it saying that that's all we're going to get from Kickstarter. Well, first thing, you take 20% off and throw it down the toilet, because that's Kickstarter's fees, chargebacks, whatever. So you really have $400,000. Then, because of the Kickstarter, you give out prizes, T-shirts, boxed copies, etc. Well, it's going to cost you money. So you have to figure out how much that's all going to cost and take that money and you put it away in a separate bank account and you never touch it. Too many Kickstarters touch that money. So now we're down to $300,000. $300,000 now is what we have to make this game. In that case, I'll be paying myself pretty much minimum wage, paying just enough money to pay my rent, paying enough money to pay for macaroni and cheese and so forth. So that's going to cover me for about a year and a half. And there's another track of money to pay for my wife, the Janelle Jakeways, who's going to do design. And then there's money set aside. I'm going to pay musicians this much money. If a musician won't work for that amount of money, I will find one who will. But that's all I have. There is no more money. Now, granted, if I somehow in the Kickstarter earned more money, let's say the Kickstarter brought in $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000, then in that case I can then say, oh, instead of paying the musician $5,000 for everything, I can say, hey, I can now up it up to $10,000 or maybe $20,000 or, heaven forbid, $50,000. In that case, I can say, musician, write me a score and hire the Bulgarian Symphony Orchestra to play it because I can afford it now. Otherwise, it's $5,000 and the person's doing the music in their own synthesizers and they're just handing you the MP3s. And there you go. And but it's back to scaling the budget. You have to have hard numbers, hard budgets, and don't do wishful thinking. I've seen so many Kickstarters out there in which an example would be like more recently, like what was it? The John Romero one. At least he was honest. He was flat out honest, saying that if they raised the money for the Kickstarter, that was only to be able to give them a work in progress demo so they could show it to a publisher to give them the rest of the money. So that otherwise, if no one will give it to them, they're just going to give you the first level proof of concept demo and call it quits. But at least they were honest about it. So many Kickstarters out there say, I'm going to make the game for this much money. And they give you the impression that that's how much money the game's going to cost. But instead, after they take your money and they start producing the game, then they say, great, we've now financed a tech demo or a vertical slice of the game so you can show it to publishers to bring in the $4 or $5 million they feel they're really going to cost to finish this game. And then at that point, they'll ship you the finished game that, free copies based on monies that they used from you, the Kickstarter backers, to help them invest into the game to get it going. The John Romero one, Black Room, yes, the Black Room, that's the one. I mean, he was honest. He did say right off the bat that he was planning that the money from the Kickstarter was not enough to finish the game. It was only enough to get publishers interested in the game to do it. But there are companies out there that have done games in which that they went a little bit big. One that comes to mind is Double Fine. They said, Double Fine Adventure, $400,000. I don't know what they really had in mind to do the game, but when they ended up with $3 million, okay, great. They're going to make a $3 million game, but instead they ended up so overblowing the budget that by the time the game shipped, they only gave you half the game, and they relied on sales of that game to fund the other half. To me, that says somebody wasn't really taking into account the budgets and keeping an eye on everything, saying, hey, we have this much money, only make a game that costs this much to make. Not, oh, we have an unlimited budget, let's just keep making the game until, we ran out of budget. Let's go figure out ways of raising money right now so we can keep developing. That's the, seat of your pants type of project management. And that's, I've seen too many companies fail because of that. Way too many companies fail. A good example would be 38 Studios. They failed because nobody ever sat down and told them, hey, to make an MMO, it's going to cost this much money. Where are you going to raise that much money from day one, or at least know from the ground, from the beginning to the end? Instead, they start making the game, start putting it in, spending money like water on great benefits. I mean, as I understand it, working at 38 Studios is pretty awesome, but they burned through the money so fast that by the time that they actually got a tech demo of Project Copernicus working, they literally ran out of money. and defaulted on loans that they took out to make what they made, and they went out of business in a most spectacular way. And other games is but for me is you've got to have a good idea of how much this is going to cost and what you're trying to do with the game. Because the whole point is once the game is done and you put it up on Steam or you put it up on Good Old Games, you put it up on PSN or Xbox Live or whatever it is, you already have an idea saying this game costs $300,000 to make, or $1 million to make, or $3 million. It really depends on how much you got in Kickstarter. This is how many copies it's going to have to sell in order for you to recoup all that money back. Someone asked the police. I live in a skyscraper in downtown Seattle, so occasionally out the window I can hear a passing fire truck or police car. Mostly it's a fire truck because there's a fire truck near where I live. So I hear the fire truck about 3 or 4 times a day, easily. But before I got sidetracked, once you start selling the game, the idea is you want to sell enough copies to make as much, if not more money than what it costs to make it. The reason you want to do this, and that's your litmus test of a success or failure, is that if you make more money than you paid to make the game, you now have the money to make the sequel or to make another game. Because you now have the money. Because you raise in Kickstarter $300,000, $200,000, $1 million. I'll just say $1 million because it's a nice round number. So you raise $1 million. You have $1 million. So you make a game worth $1 million. Yay! You got a game worth $1 million. You put it up on Steam. People love your game. They start buying it. And then they start pirating it and whatever it is, but you only sell about $200,000 worth. So now you've got $200,000. So effectively, what the buying public has just told you is your game is really only worth $200,000. So you better make your sequel for $200,000 or less, so at least you could know that you do the game again and release the next game, you're still going to make $200,000. If you make $5 million or so forth, you got profit. But now I know I've got a formula that if I spend $1 million, I can make 5. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to spend $1 million and make the sequel. Put the rest of the money away for either profits or something, but some for hey, if this game fails, at least I have enough money to make 4 more games because I have $5 million in the bank. This is a way for you that, hey, on your success, you now, because of good project management and good budgeting, you can keep your company now going, because then if the game fails, fine, I still got more money in the bank. 12-minute warning, got it. If the game succeeds, you get even more money. And then there's a litmus test saying, if I've got enough money in the bank to be able to run my company for 3 years, any excess money, I'm just going to give it out bonuses or profits or something like that and give checks to the people who helped me make this game. Because only an arrogant person would say, I am the only person who created this game. Because unless they actually did. I mean, I've met people who wrote every line of code, every note of music, every bit of voice acting. In that case, they have every right to say, I'm the one who made this game. But in my games, yes, I created the game, but did I make everything? No. Bard's Tale 3 example. Bard's Tale 3 was made by 4 people. There was myself as the designer, lead engineer, lead everything. I mean, it was my baby. But Mike Stackpole came up with the story. He wrote a lot of prose that's in there. Mike Stackpole, he's in that list. Kurt Hayden, he wrote all that beautiful music that was inside the Bard's Tale 3. Then I have Todd Camasta, his tireless arting, drawing all that art that was in Bard's Tale 3. The 4 of us were the people who made that game. And all 4 of us share equally in making this game real. Because I couldn't draw that art. No way. The music, I could have composed it, yes, but I was busy writing the code. Kurt came to the rescue and he delivered. Mike Stackpole, he came up with some stuff, and he's a professional writer. He knows story, how to interact the story, how to do this. I fleshed things out, added scenarios and things, because as we were playing the game, we found things like he didn't think of. I put it in. Same goes with Dragon Wars. Dragon Wars, the guy was Paul O'Connor, was the one who came up with the storyline. But I did the technology. Todd Camasta once again came with the Todd Camasta came in with the art. In this case, it was Charles Deenan and Kurt Heiden who did the music. Charles Deenan did the music for like the Amiga ST, and the Apple II version was done by Kurt Heiden. Also, I think I remember Dave Warhol. I think he did the music for Bart's Tale, Commodore 64. But as you can see, it was all these different people. They each contributed to the game to make it happen. Of course, like if I actually had money to pay out bonuses, I would say, hey, everybody, here's a check, because if it wasn't for you, this game wouldn't be as popular as it is. Because I've seen too many stories where people who would be the leader of a project, the project is done, they get all the profits because the game did succeed, and they just kept all the money. It just makes people bitter in the industry, because these games these days are team effort. These are some of my, I'm going to, since now at the 10-minute, in this case, 9-minute warning, I'm going to start closing it here, is that, and by the way, anybody here have any questions for me? If you do, write it down in the pop-up main stage chat window. I'll be happy to answer them. But back to what I was saying is that video games are hard work in the deafening momentarily. I'm not quite sure what deafening momentarily means. Am I deaf? Oh, maybe he's quieting down or something. I don't know. Okay. Anyways, what I was saying is that video games are a labor of love. As a programmer, as a computer programmer, I could easily make double to triple the amount of money I'm making right now if I went to work for places like Bloomberg doing stock analysis, doing medical billing, doing really boring software. But I'd be working on software that no one would know I was writing. Example, you're driving a car. It has that heads-up display. Somebody wrote that. Somebody designed it. Somebody did all that UI in your car. But will you ever know who that person is? No. But they probably got paid very well. Air traffic controllers, they have the screens. I know a person who makes the software that does the screens for air traffic controllers. She gets paid really, really well. No one will ever know her name. But in my case, when my kids were little, the thing that made me most proud when I was making video games was going into a GameStop in 1994 when my kids were toddlers, and they pointed at a game and said, my mom made that. My mom made that game right there. Jazz Jackrabbit, she made that. Aliens vs. Predator for the Mac, she made that. Myth 3: The Wolf Age, she made that. Granted, I didn't make nearly as much money as I could have if I worked at a, GM or something like that. The fact that my kids could do that and people look at me and like, oh, you actually made this game? Says, yes, I did. That makes it all worthwhile. So I'm going to open it up to questions right now. So because I only have just a few minutes left. So anybody here who has a question, or am I going to have deafening audience? Svito says, how often do you face issues with programming limitations while developing some peculiar required features, and how do you overcome them? Oh my God, that's a great question. Right now, today, and even in the past, I've been well known in programming on machines that are cutting edge. I like to call them bleeding edge, because like these VR headsets that are out there, their software's not done yet. So that I would be working on it and I would find, I found a bug in the rendering pipeline. I'd find a bug that if you tilt your head in a certain way, it would lose tracking. I would find all these different things. I would have to contact the people who programmed it. I would have to figure out workarounds. I'm really, really good with VTune and Visual Studio Debugger and GDB, and it's mostly because I have to figure out how to get around these features. I mean, I could tell a whole story about how I had to do Out of This World for Super Nintendo, in which when I did the first draft of it, it was using a Super FX chip. But they said, oh no, we can't afford the Super Effects chip. Says, well, then how about if I put a static RAM in there and use DMA? Oh, we can't afford to put static RAM. How about if I put it on fast cartridge? No, we can't afford fast cartridge. Put it on slow cartridge. Every one of these hurdles is mostly because of we're too cheap. But I managed to figure out how to do it on a cheap cartridge and get it out there. And to me, even to this day, Out of This World is one of my most proudest achievements. It writes, what do you think of the rise of engines like Unity? How do they enable more people to make games, and how they dumb down programming? I found that the rise of Unity and Unreal is a mixed blessing. It brings creativity of game genres that we would have never thought of, because a lot of people who come up with great game ideas aren't programmers. They can't program out of a paper bag, but they can script, or they can use something like Unity's abilities or pre-done games to put together the concepts. At the same time, though, is that I know myself and other friends of mine who are making a living who are going around fixing Unity games, because people who don't know what they're doing are writing a game, they put it together in Unity, and the game runs at 5 frames per second, and they don't know why. And it comes to people like myself and others that I know, in which we go in there and say, oh, it's because you using this function which takes this long. And they really don't have a clue, saying, but I sort the polygons every frame. How sort slow? It's just one little function. Sort is not fast. It is not fast. And they don't grasp it because they do not understand programming. They think that a square root is the same speed as a sort 10,000 particles. No, they're not the same speed. They think that C# is just as fast as C++. No, C# is much slower than C++. Yes, there is a runtime component which is equal, but all the error checking, all the bounds checking, all the garbage collecting is overhead that you don't see, but C++ doesn't deal with. So that's why it runs faster. So I'm seeing a lot of people thinking that they're programmers when I just want to just go to the other room and laugh my head off when they make statements like, oh, sort should be fast. No, it's not. But at the same time, we've seen an explosion of independent games on Steam and so forth, in which they're doing concepts and things that I would have never thought of. And they're just making, it's just a wonderful time to be in game dev right now, just in games, just even a game player, just seeing all the different games and game concepts and game ideas. I mean, like, look at Undertale. Oh, if it wasn't for a game maker, the game wouldn't exist. I think I should be wrapping up now. So one last question before I get kicked out of here. Anybody? Stalt writes, are there any semi-recent text adventure games like Mind Shadow you recommend, or any other projects of yours you recommend for people who enjoy those types of games? Thanks for this lecture. Really interesting stuff. Let's see here. There is a text adventure creator, which is a point and click that's done on the web, and its name escapes me right now. But I remember it is an engine that people have been using to make text adventures. Of course, just grab everything from Infocom. That will basically keep you occupied for a couple of months if you just want to play all of them. If you like more graphical ones, just play the old classic LucasArts games like Day of the Tentacle and so forth. Many of them are available right now. Yes, if it escapes you, put a backslash in front of it. I've heard that joke. Of course, you can always find Mind Shadow, Tracer Sanctions, Borrowed Time, Task Times, and Tone Town up on emulators and on the web. Of course, I can't really advocate that because it is advocating piracy, but it's not like Activision's going around chasing people down for that. Maybe it's Quest. I don't know. I just, I have to do a few Google searches. You'll probably find it. I've been actually thinking of one of these days doing another graphic text adventure game, but it's back to, I've got so many concepts I'd like to do, I just don't have time to do it. And of course, right now, my main focus that when I do have free time is Shredded Worlds, Dragons of the Rip. Any special advice for programmers? Two things. One, GitHub is your friend. You don't know how to do something, you want to see an example for an API, look at how people are using that API in GitHub. That's where I go first. Secondly, is when you go to Stack Overflow and you copy and paste that code, don't copy and paste that code unless you absolutely understand every single line of that code you're copying and pasting. Because not all that code on Stack Overflow actually works. So you could be putting in a piece of code into your product that doesn't actually work or mostly works, and then later on you're wondering like, hey, why am I having a buffer overflow? Or why is my game crashing for no reason? Well, it's maybe because that code that you thought that worked didn't. But anyways, I'm given the 1 minute mark, so I'm going to close off. This is Rebecca Heineman of Old Skulle. I'm really glad you've been invited to speak here, and I hope you guys enjoyed my talk here. You're welcome. You're welcome, Svito. Yep. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Burger Becky, or follow me on my personal webpage, which is burgerbecky.com. And of course, our company is Old Skulle, OLDESKUL.com. I'm going to type in the links here on so you can get it. And if you want to actually read my comic book, if you're into anime or something like that, I haven't updated in a while, but there it goes. So enjoy. Oh, thank you, Cookie. Yay. All right. Take care, everybody. I'm muting now. Bye.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. We will be having another speaker here at about 7:30 p.m. And it's going to be Connor Van Dyke and Gabriel Orlandelli talking with Major Games. I'm going to be interviewing them personally, and then we'll be opening up a little Q&A after the fact. Other than that, just stay tuned, folks.